On a chilly, moonless night, a school bus rumbled down a long, winding road that cut through a dense forest. The only source of light was the dim, flickering interior of the bus. A group of tired, hushed students sat in their seats, eager to return home after a late school event. As the bus navigated the winding path, it suddenly lurched to a halt. The driver, Mr. Johnson, peered out into the inky darkness, his brow furrowed with concern. The forest was deathly quiet, devoid of the usual nighttime sounds. Through the bus windows, the students saw a figure standing in the road, barely illuminated by the dim headlights. Mr. Johnson, his voice trembling, instructed the students to stay on board while he investigated. He stepped off the bus and approached the mysterious figure. The students watched in silence as Mr. Johnson exchanged words with the stranger. They couldn't hear what was said, but the conversation seemed odd, filled with strange gestures and unsettling laughter. Then, the stranger abruptly stepped aside, allowing Mr. Johnson to return to the bus. Relieved, the bus driver resumed his seat and continued down the road. But as the bus passed the stranger, the students saw his face clearly for the first time. His eyes were dark voids, and his smile was impossibly wide, stretching unnaturally across his face. Fear coursed through the bus as the students realized that something was terribly wrong. They began to whisper to each other, trying to make sense of the encounter. Mr. Johnson's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel. Suddenly, the bus's headlights flickered, and the interior plunged into complete darkness. Panic erupted as students screamed and fumbled for their phones to use as flashlights. Amid the chaos, a chilling voice filled the bus, echoing from all directions. It was the voice of the stranger they had encountered, and he whispered, "You should have never come this way." The students huddled together in terror as the bus continued to drive through the pitch-black forest, guided by an unseen force. Unearthly shadows danced outside the windows, and the bus seemed to be traveling on a road that shouldn't exist. Hours passed, and when dawn finally broke, the bus emerged from the forest, battered and covered in strange, otherworldly markings. The students had no memory of what transpired during that nightmarish journey. To this day, they cannot explain what happened on the school bus that eerie night. Some say they glimpsed an otherworldly realm, while others believe they encountered a malevolent spirit. But one thing is certain, they will never forget the night when their ordinary school bus ride became a terrifying descent into the unknown. Deep in the heart of a sprawling metropolis, a school bus known as Bus 13 carried a notorious reputation. It was said to be cursed, with a dark history that stretched back decades. The legend began when the bus was involved in a tragic accident that claimed the lives of several students. Since that day, it was rumored that Bus 13 was haunted by the vengeful spirits of those who had perished. One rainy evening, as the school day ended, a group of daring high school students decided to test the legend. They boarded Bus 13, their laughter masking their unease. The bus was old, its seats worn and torn, but it seemed like any other school bus. As the bus pulled away from the school, the rain intensified, creating a claustrophobic atmosphere inside. The students' unease grew as the windows fogged up and the interior lights flickered ominously. The bus took an unexpected turn, veering away from the usual route. Panic spread among the students as they realized they had lost control. The driver, an elderly man with a pallid complexion, never once turned to acknowledge their pleas. With each passing moment, the bus descended deeper into darkness, the streets becoming more decrepit and overgrown. The students were trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape. Suddenly, the bus came to a halt in front of an abandoned, dilapidated school. The doors creaked open, and the students reluctantly disembarked, feeling an irresistible force compelling them to enter the eerie building. Inside, the school was frozen in time, its walls adorned with faded photographs of long-forgotten students. Sinister laughter echoed through the empty halls as the students wandered deeper into the darkness, unable to resist the pull of the malevolent spirits. One by one, the students encountered the ghosts of those who had died in the accident. The spirits whispered their names, their faces twisted in torment. Desperate to escape, the students retraced their steps, but the school had become an ever-shifting labyrinth, trapping them in an endless loop of terror. As the night wore on, the students' screams echoed through the school, merging with the laughter of the vengeful spirits. They had become prisoners of Bus 13's curse, destined to relive their worst nightmares for eternity, a warning to all who dared to board the haunted bus. In a quiet, forgotten town, there stood an abandoned schoolhouse with a haunting history. Locals whispered about the tragedy that unfolded there decades ago, on a fateful night during a school dance. It was a chilly autumn evening when the school hosted its annual masquerade ball. The school's gymnasium was adorned with dimly lit chandeliers, and students donned elaborate masks and costumes. Among them was a mysterious girl named Amelia, who arrived late to the dance, her face concealed behind a porcelain mask. Amelia's presence was a mystery to everyone. No one knew where she came from, and she never spoke. She moved gracefully through the dance, drawing the attention of many with her enigmatic allure. As the night wore on, a young man named Samuel approached Amelia and asked her to dance. She silently accepted, and they waltzed to the haunting melody of a forgotten tune. They danced so perfectly that it seemed as though they were one. Hours passed, and the clock struck midnight. At that moment, Amelia's mask slipped, revealing her pale, lifeless face. Gasps echoed through the room as Samuel recoiled in terror. The music screeched to a halt, and the lights flickered ominously. Amelia's gaze met Samuel's, her eyes empty and hollow. She whispered a haunting promise, "Dance with me forever." Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, and a bone-chilling wind swept through the gymnasium. When the lights returned, Amelia and Samuel were gone, but their dance had left an eerie imprint. From that night on, the schoolhouse was said to be haunted by the ghostly couple. Students and teachers reported hearing phantom footsteps and the distant strains of a waltz at odd hours. Some claimed to have seen the figures of Amelia and Samuel locked in a perpetual dance, their masks concealing their true faces. The school's legend grew, and on the anniversary of that fateful night, a ghostly masquerade ball was said to reenact their spectral dance. Brave souls who ventured into the abandoned schoolhouse on that night heard the eerie music and witnessed the haunting dance of two lost souls, forever bound to the school by a promise made on a haunted autumn night. Once upon a time, in an old, decrepit school nestled at the edge of a dark forest, there was a legend that whispered through the halls. They said that on the third floor, a classroom was sealed shut, and no one knew what lay behind its rusted door. Every year, on the night of the full moon, strange sounds echoed through the empty corridors. Students who dared to venture near the sealed classroom claimed to hear eerie whispers and ghostly laughter. Some even swore they saw faint, flickering lights beneath the door. One fateful night, a group of adventurous students decided to unlock the mystery. Armed with flashlights and trembling courage, they crept up the creaking stairs to the third floor. As they reached the forbidden door, their flashlights flickered and went out. In the pitch darkness, they fumbled for the door handle, and with a screech of old hinges, it slowly swung open. The room was shrouded in an otherworldly mist, and the air grew icy cold. There, at the front of the classroom, they saw an old, dusty chalkboard covered in cryptic symbols. Suddenly, the chalk on the board began to move on its own, etching a message: "You shouldn't have come." Terrified, they tried to flee, but the door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. Whispers filled the room, and ghostly figures materialized around them. The students realized they were not alone. The spirits of former students who had dared to unlock the classroom secret now sought company for eternity. As the full moon cast an eerie glow through the windows, the students' fate was sealed. Their frightened screams joined the chorus of haunting laughter that echoed through the cursed school, warning others never to venture near that forsaken classroom on the third floor. In a small, isolated town, there stood an ancient school that had been abandoned for decades. Locals whispered about the strange occurrences that had driven everyone away. One tale, in particular, sent shivers down their spines. The school's basement was a place of dread, where rumors of a sinister entity persisted. They called it the Dweller in the Dark. It was said to be a malevolent presence that lurked in the shadows, feeding on fear and despair. One gloomy evening, a curious teenager named Sarah decided to investigate the abandoned school. Armed with a flashlight and an insatiable curiosity, she descended into the basement, ignoring the warning signs and the ominous feeling that washed over her. The basement was a labyrinth of decaying classrooms and eerie, graffiti-covered walls. Sarah's flashlight flickered as she ventured deeper. Strange, echoing whispers filled the air, and her heart pounded in her chest. In one forgotten room, she found a rusted cage with cryptic symbols etched into its bars. As she peered inside, her flashlight dimmed further, and the room grew colder. Suddenly, the cage door creaked open on its own, and a spine-chilling voice echoed through the darkness, whispering her name. Paralyzed with terror, Sarah couldn't move as shadowy tendrils slithered from the cage, wrapping around her ankles and pulling her closer. The Dweller in the Dark emerged, a grotesque, formless mass of darkness that seemed to have 1,000 eyes. Its voice grew louder, filling her mind with horrifying visions and nightmarish thoughts. Sarah's screams went unheard as the malevolent entity began to feed on her fear. She could feel her sanity slipping away. Days later, the townsfolk found the basement door ajar, and Sarah's flashlight lying on the ground. But she was nowhere to be found. The basement remained sealed, and the legend of the Dweller in the Dark served as a chilling reminder to all who dared to enter the forsaken school, where nightmares became all too real. On the first day of school at a quaint, suburban elementary school, excitement and anticipation filled the air. Children dressed in their finest outfits, clutching backpacks and lunchboxes, gathered in the schoolyard. But this particular year, something unusual was afoot. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the day, the students filed into their classrooms. In Mrs. Anderson's third-grade class, there was a new student named Emily, a shy girl with jet-black hair and piercing green eyes. She took her seat in the back of the room, looking around nervously. The day proceeded as usual until recess, when Emily approached a group of kids huddled together by the jungle gym. She had an odd request. She asked them to play a game called The Mirror. Curiosity piqued, the kids agreed. Emily instructed them to form a circle, hold hands, and close their eyes. She began to chant in a soft, eerie voice, "Mirror, mirror, show the way. Take us to a world of night and day." As they chanted, a strange sensation washed over them. When they opened their eyes, they were no longer on the school playground. Instead, they stood in a surreal, otherworldly realm. The sky was a swirling mix of colors, and the ground felt like it was made of shifting sand. Emily grinned, revealing sharp teeth that gleamed in the eerie light. She had led them to a dimension where the rules of reality did not apply. Panic set in as the kids realized they were trapped. Desperate to return home, they begged Emily to undo the spell, but she only laughed. She explained that they were now in her world, and she was its ruler. The children's fear grew as they saw bizarre creatures lurking in the shadows. Days turned into weeks, and the kids were forced to adapt to this strange land, living in constant fear. They learned to avoid Emily at all costs, but she watched their every move with those unsettling green eyes. One by one, the children lost hope of ever returning home. The first day of school had turned into a never-ending nightmare, a lesson in the consequences of playing with forces beyond their understanding. They had learned that not all new classmates were what they seemed, and that some secrets were better left unexplored. In a small, remote village nestled deep in the mountains, an unusual tradition took place on the first day of school. As the children gathered in the rustic one-room schoolhouse, they noticed an eerie addition to the classroom, an ancient, ornate mirror. The mirror, known as the reflection portal, had been passed down through generations. It was said to possess a peculiar power. On the first day of school, it could reveal each student's deepest fear. As the teacher, Mr. Graves, welcomed the students, he explained the ritual. One by one, they would step in front of the mirror and gaze into their own reflection. Whatever fear or phobia they harbored in their hearts would manifest in the mirror. The room grew tense as the first child, Lily, approached the mirror. She stared into it, her eyes widening with terror. In the reflection, a grotesque, shadowy figure crept up behind her. The classroom gasped as Lily screamed and stumbled backward. One after another, the children faced their fears in the mirror. Some saw their worst nightmares come to life, from swarms of spiders to ghostly apparitions. Each revelation left the students trembling and pale. Finally, it was Timmy's turn, the bravest of them all. He stood before the mirror, a determined look in his eyes. As he gazed into it, his reflection remained calm, but a sinister grin spread across the mirror's surface. Mr. Graves gasped, recognizing the meaning behind the twisted reflection. It wasn't Timmy's own fear that had appeared, it was the fear he inspired in others. Timmy had a dark secret, and the mirror had exposed it. The room fell into an uneasy silence as Timmy, now visibly shaken, stepped away from the mirror. He had seen the darkness within himself that he had long denied. Years passed, and the village continued the eerie tradition of the reflection portal. Timmy, haunted by what he had seen, became a recluse. The mirror's revelation had changed him, serving as a constant reminder that sometimes, the most unsettling fear lies within one's own soul, waiting to be unearthed on the first day of school.